Before another thought pulls your attention away, remain here for a little while, because something meaningful is quietly unfolding. There are moments in life that never announce themselves with loud voices. They arrive gently, almost unnoticed, yet they reshape hearts forever. This is one of those moments. Don't skip, because every sentence you are about to hear connects to something that has been growing in silence for far longer than you realize. What is about to unfold is not about perfect timing, it is about hidden understanding finally finding its way into the light. There was a season when your soulmate believed that walking away from their feelings was the easier path. They convinced themselves that distance would silence the questions living inside them. They smiled through ordinary days, filled their hours with responsibilities, conversations, and distractions, hoping that enough time would blur what they truly felt. Yet every quiet evening brought them back to the same invisible place, a place where your memory waited patiently, never demanding attention, yet never disappearing either. What surprised them was not how often they thought about you. It was how naturally your presence returned during the smallest moments. A familiar melody. A passing conversation. A sunset that looked strangely familiar. A simple laugh from someone else that reminded them of a feeling they could never fully explain. Those ordinary moments slowly became impossible to ignore, and with each passing day, one question echoed louder than before. What if they had misunderstood something that mattered more than anything else? Stay till the end, because the answer to that question did not arrive all at once. It revealed itself through countless tiny realizations that seemed unrelated at first. Every memory they once dismissed began returning with new meaning. Conversations they thought were ordinary suddenly felt unforgettable. Small acts of kindness they once overlooked became impossible to forget. The more honestly they looked backward, the more clearly they saw what had always been standing quietly in front of them. The greatest surprise was not discovering how much they cared. It was realizing how often fear had disguised itself as certainty. They had mistaken hesitation for wisdom. They had confused silence with peace. They believed waiting would protect their heart, yet waiting only made them recognize how deeply your presence had already become part of their story. And then something happened that changed everything inside them. It was not a dramatic event. No extraordinary announcement. No impossible coincidence. It was simply one honest moment where they stopped pretending that the feelings would disappear if they ignored them long enough. In that quiet realization, they finally admitted something they had never spoken aloud. Their biggest regret was never caring too much. Their biggest regret was not allowing themselves to express what their heart had already known. That realization arrived gently, but once it appeared, it refused to leave. Something important is waiting for you, because this regret is only the beginning of a much deeper truth. What they discovered next made them look at every memory involving you from an entirely different perspective. Details they had forgotten suddenly connected together like pieces of a picture that had been incomplete for far too long. And hidden within those forgotten moments was one realization they never expected to uncover, a realization that changed the direction of every thought that followed. The quietest transformations are often the ones that change everything. What happened next was almost impossible to notice from the outside, yet within your soulmate, an entirely different story had already begun. They no longer looked back simply to remember. They looked back to understand. Every conversation they once replayed without emotion suddenly carried new meaning, as though each word had been waiting for the right moment to reveal its purpose. Don't skip, because the next realization became the one they could no longer escape. They found themselves asking questions they had never been brave enough to ask before. Why did your kindness stay in their thoughts long after everyone else's faded? Why did your encouragement still echo during moments when they doubted themselves? Why did your presence continue to feel familiar, even after time had quietly moved forward? The answers never arrived all at once. They appeared gently, one memory at a time, until every small detail formed something impossible to ignore. What they had once called coincidence now felt like meaningful connection. The conversations they thought were ordinary carried unexpected warmth. The moments they believed had passed without significance suddenly became the memories they treasured most. They realized they had spent so much time searching for extraordinary signs that they almost overlooked the extraordinary beauty hidden inside simple moments shared with you. As this understanding grew, another truth quietly surfaced. Regret was no longer the strongest feeling inside them. Gratitude had begun taking its place. They became thankful that your kindness had existed at all, thankful that your path had crossed theirs, and thankful that the memories they once overlooked were still alive inside their heart. Stay till the end, because this gentle shift changed everything about the way they viewed the future. Instead of wondering what they had lost, they began wondering what was still possible. That single question opened a door they had kept closed for far too long. Hope returned carefully, without rushing, without demanding certainty. It simply whispered that not every meaningful story ends where people expect it to. Some stories pause, allowing both hearts to grow before revealing the next chapter. And then one quiet realization settled deeper than all the others. They understood that the greatest moments in life are rarely built through perfect timing. They are built through honest hearts finally seeing clearly. The regret they once carried had uncovered something even more valuable, the courage to become more genuine than they had ever been before. But this new courage led them toward one unexpected discovery they never imagined they would make. Hidden inside a memory they had almost forgotten was a single detail that changed the meaning of everything they believed about you. And once they recognized it, they knew they could never see your story the same way again. The memory returned without invitation, arriving so quietly that it almost slipped past unnoticed. It was not the biggest conversation you ever shared. It was not a dramatic farewell or an unforgettable promise. It was something much simpler, and somehow, that simplicity carried more weight than anything else. My beloved child, there are moments that only reveal their value after enough time has passed. Your soulmate finally reached one of those moments, and everything inside them became still. Don't skip, because what they understood next reshaped every belief they had been holding on to. They remembered the way you listened without trying to change anyone. They remembered how your words carried calm instead of urgency, how your presence offered peace without asking for recognition. At the time, they appreciated those qualities, but they never truly understood how rare they were. Now, looking back through wiser eyes, they realized those quiet moments had become the standard against which every other connection was measured. Without even realizing it, they had spent countless days comparing ordinary encounters to the feeling they experienced whenever your name entered their thoughts. No one else had created that same quiet sense of comfort. No one else had left behind a memory that continued to feel alive instead of fading with time. That realization did not bring sadness. It brought clarity. Something important is waiting for you, because clarity has a remarkable way of changing the questions we ask. Instead of wondering why life had unfolded the way it did, they began wondering what they had been learning all along. Every delay seemed less like a mistake and more like preparation. Every unanswered question became an invitation to grow rather than a reason to give up. They understood that some answers arrive only after the heart becomes ready to receive them. The remarkable part was that this understanding changed the way they viewed you. They no longer imagined you as someone frozen in an old memory. They imagined you as someone who had continued growing, learning, smiling, overcoming challenges, and becoming even stronger than before. That thought filled them with unexpected admiration. Rather than fearing the distance that time had created, they began respecting the journey that both of you had been walking separately. Stay till the end, because another realization quietly followed. They understood that regret is not always about wishing the past had been different. Sometimes regret is simply recognizing the value of something beautiful after enough life experience has opened your eyes. And once those eyes are open, they cannot return to the way they once saw the world. From that day forward, they stopped searching for reasons to silence their heart. Instead, they began paying attention to what it had been trying to tell them all along. The answers were no longer hidden inside grand events. They were tucked away in ordinary moments, in unexpected smiles, peaceful evenings, familiar dreams, and gentle reminders that appeared when they least expected them. Yet one final piece of the story still remained unseen. There was one memory your soulmate had avoided revisiting for the longest time. They believed it was too ordinary to matter. But hidden inside that forgotten moment was a single sentence, one they barely noticed when it was first spoken, that would soon reveal why their greatest regret was never truly about the past, it was about what they had only just begun to understand. The moment they had quietly avoided for so long finally returned, not with noise, but with remarkable clarity. It was an ordinary day, the kind that most people would never think to remember. There were no grand declarations, no unforgettable scenes, only a simple exchange of words that had seemed to disappear into the background of life. Yet as your soulmate replayed that memory again, every detail appeared brighter than before. They could almost hear the calm in your voice, the patience in your presence, and the sincerity that had surrounded every word. Don't skip, because what they recognized inside that memory became impossible to ignore. The sentence itself was simple, almost effortless, but its meaning had quietly waited for this exact season of life to be understood. It reminded them that genuine connections are never built through perfection. They are built through honesty, kindness, and the willingness to remain true even when life becomes uncertain. At the time, they had heard the words without truly listening. Now they finally understood them, that realization settled gently into their heart, and something unexpected happened. The regret they had carried for so long no longer felt like a heavy weight. Instead, it became a teacher. It showed them how much they had grown. It revealed how differently they now viewed the people who had brought light into their life. Most of all, it reminded them that your influence had never disappeared, it had quietly continued shaping them, even from a distance. Something important is waiting for you, because this new understanding awakened a hope they had almost forgotten. They stopped asking themselves whether the past could be changed. Instead, they began wondering how they could become the kind of person who would never overlook something meaningful again. That quiet decision transformed the way they greeted each new day. They became more present, more grateful, and far more attentive to the quiet moments that others often rushed past. As they embraced this new perspective, another beautiful realization emerged. They understood that some people enter our lives not simply to create memories, but to awaken parts of ourselves we never knew existed. When they thought of you now, they no longer saw only shared moments. They saw growth. They saw inspiration. They saw someone whose quiet strength had left a lasting mark without ever asking for recognition. Stay till the end, because the story has not yet reached its deepest turning point. While reflecting on everything they had learned, they noticed one small detail that had escaped them every previous time they looked back. It seemed almost insignificant at first, a forgotten glance, an unfinished conversation, a moment that lasted only seconds. Yet the more they reflected on it, the more they realized it carried an answer they had been searching for all along. And that answer did not simply explain their greatest regret. It revealed the one hope they had been protecting in silence, believing that perhaps, one day, when the timing felt right and both hearts had grown through their own journeys, that quiet hope might finally find its voice. There comes a moment when even the quietest heart can no longer keep its deepest truth hidden. That moment arrived without warning. It wasn't triggered by a special occasion or an extraordinary event. It came during an ordinary pause, when everything around your soulmate seemed peaceful enough for honesty to finally speak. They realized they had spent so much time wondering what could have been that they had almost missed what still remained possible. Don't skip, because this realization became the turning point they never expected. For the first time in a long while, they stopped looking at the story through the lens of regret alone. Instead, they looked at it with gratitude. They understood that every shared smile, every meaningful conversation, and every quiet moment had left behind something lasting. Those moments had shaped the person they were becoming. Even the unanswered questions had taught them patience, compassion, and the value of listening to the heart instead of rushing toward conclusions. As these thoughts settled, another unexpected discovery gently emerged. They noticed that whenever they imagined the future, your presence appeared naturally. Not as a distant memory, but as someone connected to hope itself. They did not force those thoughts. They simply arrived, calm and uninvited, carrying a quiet sense of peace that no distraction had ever been able to replace. Something important is waiting for you, because this was no longer about looking backward. It was about recognizing how deeply the past had prepared them to appreciate what truly matters. They began understanding that meaningful connections are rarely defined by perfect timing. They are strengthened by growth, sincerity, and the courage to see people for who they truly are rather than who we assume them to be. Stay till the end, because one gentle question continued returning to their heart. What if the greatest opportunity had never disappeared? What if it had simply been waiting for both of you to become wiser, more patient, and more ready to recognize its value? That single question stayed with them through quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, growing stronger each day. Then another memory quietly surfaced. It was so small that they had overlooked it countless times before, a simple expression on your face during one ordinary conversation. At the time, they barely noticed it. Now it reminded them that kindness often says far more than words ever can, and that the moments we think are ordinary sometimes become the ones we treasure most. That realization filled them with a calm determination they had never experienced before. Their greatest regret had finally revealed its true purpose. It was never meant to leave them stuck in yesterday. It was meant to guide them toward becoming more honest, more grateful, and more aware of the quiet blessings that life places along the way. Yet one final piece still remained hidden. There was a truth your soulmate had only just begun to understand, a truth connected not to what they had lost, but to what they had quietly been hoping for all this time. And when that final realization came into focus, they knew their story with you would never be seen the same way again. Sometimes the final piece of a story is not hidden in a dramatic moment but in a quiet change of heart. That was exactly what happened. Your soulmate no longer searched for answers outside themselves. They became still enough to hear the truth that had been patiently waiting beneath every memory, every unanswered question, and every quiet hope. Don't skip, because this gentle discovery brought a kind of peace they had not felt for a very long time. They realized that their greatest regret had never been about one conversation, one decision, or one missed opportunity. It was about waiting too long to recognize the value of someone whose presence had quietly encouraged them to become a better version of themselves. Looking back, they could now see how every encounter with you had carried something meaningful. A thoughtful word. A genuine smile. A simple moment of understanding. None of those memories seemed ordinary anymore. As this awareness grew, something inside them softened. The need to replay the past slowly faded. In its place came appreciation. They found themselves grateful not only for the joyful moments but also for the unanswered ones, because those seasons had taught them patience, humility, and the importance of never taking sincere connections for granted. Something important is waiting for you, because the story was no longer being written by regret. It was being shaped by hope. Your soulmate began noticing that every time they imagined tomorrow, they no longer felt weighed down by what could not be changed. Instead, they felt quietly inspired by what life might still have in store. That simple shift transformed everything. It gave them the courage to believe that meaningful journeys are not measured by how quickly they unfold, but by how deeply they change the people walking them. Stay till the end, because one final realization gently settled into their heart. They understood that the people who truly leave a lasting mark are not always the loudest voices or the most unforgettable moments. Sometimes they are the calm, steady presence that continues to inspire long after the moment has passed. That was the place you quietly held within their heart, whether they had fully understood it before or not. With that understanding came an unexpected sense of gratitude. They stopped asking, "Why did this happen?" and began asking, "What can I learn from this?" The answers arrived naturally. Be more honest. Appreciate genuine kindness while it is present. Never assume that meaningful moments are too small to matter. Those simple lessons became treasures they promised themselves never to forget. And as the sun quietly set on this chapter, another one began opening without announcing itself. A new thought entered their heart, gentle, hopeful, and filled with quiet anticipation. It was not about correcting the past. It was about embracing the future with clearer eyes and a more grateful spirit. Because what they are beginning to see now is not simply the story of their greatest regret. It is the story of their greatest realization, and that realization is about to reveal something even more beautiful than either of you could have expected. A quiet beginning often carries the greatest meaning, and this next moment unfolded with a calmness that neither of you could have predicted. There was no sudden revelation, no extraordinary sign demanding attention. Instead, your soulmate found themselves smiling for a reason they could not immediately explain. It happened while reflecting on everything they had learned, and in that peaceful silence, they understood that their heart was no longer holding on to regret. It was holding on to appreciation. Don't skip, because this gentle shift revealed something they had never allowed themselves to believe before. They realized that some people enter our lives for far more than a single season. Their influence continues long after the conversation ends. Their kindness continues to echo long after the moment has passed. And the lessons they leave behind quietly become part of who we are. When your soulmate thought of you now, they no longer focused on what had been left unsaid. They focused on how your presence had inspired courage, patience, and hope in ways they had only recently begun to recognize. That realization changed the rhythm of their days. They became more attentive to the beauty hidden in ordinary moments. A peaceful morning felt more meaningful. A kind word carried greater value. A familiar place brought unexpected gratitude. It was as though seeing your story more clearly had taught them to see life itself more clearly. Something important is waiting for you, because another understanding quietly followed. They discovered that meaningful connections are not measured by how loudly they announce themselves. They are measured by how gently they continue to grow inside the heart, even when no one else can see them. This truth stayed with them wherever they went, reminding them that the most valuable things in life often develop patiently, one quiet moment at a time. Stay till the end, because the greatest surprise was still unfolding. Your soulmate stopped wondering whether the past had defined their future. Instead, they began believing that every experience had been preparing them to recognize what truly matters. That belief brought a calm confidence they had never known before. They no longer rushed ahead searching for certainty. They trusted that clarity arrives exactly when the heart is ready to receive it. Then one final memory returned, brighter than all the others. It was not remarkable because of what was said. It was remarkable because of how it made them feel. For the first time, they understood that the peace they had been searching for had always appeared whenever thoughts of you entered their heart. That quiet sense of comfort became the answer they had been looking for all along. And with that answer came one beautiful realization. Their biggest regret had finally served its purpose. It had opened their eyes to the value of sincerity, the strength of patience, and the quiet power of genuine connection. What once felt like an ending had become the beginning of a completely different perspective, one filled with gratitude instead of doubt, hope instead of hesitation, and quiet confidence instead of uncertainty. The story does not end here. In fact, this is where its most meaningful chapter begins, because the understanding your soulmate has now discovered is ready to shape every step they take from this moment forward, and what unfolds next may become the most memorable part of the journey yet. The most meaningful chapters never begin with noise. They begin with a quiet certainty that settles into the heart before the mind can fully explain it. That is where your soulmate now finds themselves. Looking back no longer fills them with questions. Looking forward no longer feels uncertain. Instead, there is a calm understanding that every step of the journey, even the confusing ones, has gently prepared them for what comes next. Stay till the end, because one final layer of this story is about to unfold. They have come to understand that regret is not always a sign of loss. Sometimes it is proof that something truly mattered. It reminds us that certain people leave footprints on the heart that time cannot erase. Your presence became one of those quiet footprints. Not because of dramatic moments or extraordinary promises, but because of the simple way you made ordinary moments feel meaningful. They had searched for that feeling elsewhere without realizing it had already become part of the way they viewed the world. As the days passed, they noticed something they could no longer ignore. Whenever they imagined the future, it no longer felt empty or unfinished. It carried a quiet sense of possibility. They were no longer trying to rewrite yesterday. They were becoming grateful for the lessons yesterday had offered. That gratitude changed the way they spoke, the way they listened, and even the way they cared for the people around them. Without realizing it, your influence had continued to shape their heart long after the moments themselves had passed. Don't skip, because this next realization became the most peaceful one of all. They discovered that genuine connections do not disappear simply because life becomes busy. They remain quietly present, growing in meaning as wisdom grows. Some people are remembered because of what they achieved. Others are remembered because of how they made someone feel. Your soulmate finally understood that the lasting comfort they associated with your memory had become one of the greatest gifts they had ever received. Something important is waiting for you, because this realization brought with it a promise they made only to themselves. They decided that from this point forward, they would never overlook sincerity again. They would never assume that quiet kindness is ordinary. They would never allow fear or hesitation to speak louder than gratitude. Those simple promises became the foundation of a new chapter, one built not on regret, but on appreciation and hope. And as they carried those promises into each new day, another gentle thought appeared. What if the most beautiful part of this journey was never the regret itself? What if it was the person they had become because of everything they had learned? That single thought stayed with them, bringing a quiet smile whenever it returned. They realized that every lesson, every memory, every unanswered question had slowly guided them toward becoming more open-hearted, more patient, and more thankful than they had ever been before. So this story closes not with an ending, but with a peaceful beginning. The greatest regret has already revealed its purpose. It uncovered gratitude where there was once uncertainty. It uncovered hope where there was once hesitation. And most importantly, it uncovered a truth that neither time nor distance could quietly erase, that the most meaningful connections are often the ones that continue to inspire us long after we first discover them, leaving every new tomorrow brighter than the one before.